Hey, this is Warren Ridley. We have some breaking news about QuantumScape, a hot battery startup that has gotten a lot of attention through a SPAC merger and other publicity. Appeared to be a rising star, raised a lot of money in the stock market, got a lot of retail investors, and now there's a report out from Scorpion Capital, which you can see here, calling it a pump and dump SPAC scam by Silicon Valley celebrities that makes Theranos look like amateurs. I'm going to go through the Scorpion Capital report to some extent. I'm not going to cover the whole thing. There's a link to the report in the description below. And I'm going to talk about how this might be a scam. I'm going to talk about why it might not be true, why it might be okay. I'm also going to compare this to Lucid Motors and Nikola Motors. I see similarities here, and certain things that Scorpion Capital is pointing out are kind of the things I've been saying about Lucid Motors all along. Before I go any deeper, I want to thank the Vasa Law Firm in Sweden and all my Patreon supporters for helping this channel grow. You can click a link in the description below to support this channel on Patreon. Patreon supporters get early access to some content. They get access to my spreadsheets, and they get better access to me. It's actually becoming hard to communicate with me because I get such a high volume of messages. If you want to get in touch with me, you want to communicate with me, that's the best way to reach me is on Patreon. But I want to note that I checked with the limiting factor. This is Jordan Giesecke. He's a YouTube channel that I follow. He's more of a battery expert than I am. And I asked his opinion about this, and he thinks, in his words, the short seller report is a hot mess. I think the report looks poorly crafted. The layout of the report is unattractive. But as he says, a lot of valid points, also some points that aren't so great, and a lot of what Jordan calls hearsay, although it seems to me they're claiming they've spoken to multiple witnesses. This doesn't quite sound like hearsay to me. Hearsay is a legal term. This doesn't really fit for this purpose. So let's get into it. Are you ready? Let's go! One of the key components of the Scorpion Capital report on QuantumScape is quotes or interviews with former employees, people involved with Volkswagen and others, battery experts, going through some of the stories that QuantumScape is telling and claiming that what they're saying can't be true, that they're lying, that they're faking data, a lot of details like that. In the top quote here, a Volkswagen battery leader is indicating they don't really trust QuantumScape's data. They think QuantumScape's not being transparent. They think there's some other problems. They don't trust, for example, the claim that you can charge it in 15 minutes. Now, I want to be clear. This is Scorpion Capital's report. I'm not endorsing the report. I'm not saying they're right. I'm not saying they're wrong. I will say it looks credible to me, but that's an opinion. I don't know whether this is factual. Another quote here from an employee down at the bottom. He talks about that the staff and the upper management are good, but he thinks the CEO is just flat out lying as I read this. He's telling his story, selling his vision, and, quote, hopes the data catches up to him. And a lot of what Scorpion Capital is saying is they're basically pinning a lot of this on the CEO and making it look like the CEO is just flat out lying. I don't think they use those words. That's how it reads to me. They're basically calling the CEO a big-time liar. These are some more quotes from the beginning of the Scorpion Capital report. You can see at the bottom, have they solved the problems that they're representing they're solving? Absolutely not. That much I can tell you for sure. Is QuantumScape going to have a product in a car in the next 10 years? Absolutely not. And the employee number 5 there, do you think they're lying? Your question is too straightforward. I can't comment. These answers are just iffy. Now, we're relying on Scorpion Capital telling the truth and getting genuine witnesses to support them, but they're claiming they have a large number of people backing up their story. Scorpion Capital's report is extensive. It's 188 pages long. There's a link to it in the description of this video below. Right here, I just wanted to show you from the table of contents. I'm going to cover all or part of about 15 pages of this document. There's a lot more in this report that you're going to want to take a look at. But here you can see the table of contents. It starts with a part. Again, like I kind of agree with Jordan Giesecke. This is a little bit of a hot mess. I don't feel like this report was that well organized, and I feel like you say some of the same things over and over again. But this is a rough outline of what's coming. They talk about their interviews with former R&D employees, leading solid-state battery experts, and 2 employees from Volkswagen. Volkswagen employees saying Volkswagen is highly skeptical of QuantumScape's claims. Then they identify a bunch of specific claims that they think are phony. There's a Dendrite claim. I'm not going to go in depth in any of these. I'm going to touch on some of these a little bit. But the claim about Dendrites, Any battery has problem with dendrites. Over time, as the battery is used, dendrites start to form and they impair the capacity and efficiency of the battery. And you need to design your battery so that you minimize or eliminate dendrite formation. QuantumScape is claiming they've dealt with a dendrite problem, and at least what this report is going to show, they have not dealt with the dendrite problem in any meaningful way. Claim B, that they operate well in low temperatures. Scorpion Capital claims their research and their interviews show that the low temperature claim is fake, that QuantumScape manipulated temperatures to get the results that they wanted rather than what would correspond with real-world temperatures. They say the fast charging claim is phony. They say the battery life is exaggerated. Not only do they question battery performance in low temperatures, they question battery life in low temperatures, and more issues with what QuantumScape is claiming. It's interesting to note they describe it as Theranos-like red flags. This Scorpion Capital report reminds me a lot of the recent Hindenburg report from September, which was an expose into problems with Nikola Motors, which is now mostly considered a joke in the EV community and the investor community. Although it's still trading, people are still buying the stock, people are still holding it. I don't understand why. I thought the company was completely discredited, but somehow you can survive after you're exposed. Scorpion Capital seems to be playing that same role as Hindenburg Capital, exposing this, what they claim is a fraud. Just wanted to show you a little bit more about what's coming in their table of contents. Issues with multi-layer cells, evidence that they can't even reliably test the cells that they've made, a variety of red flags, cost issues, and then part 3, the background and warning signs of an impending pump and dump. I'm actually going to talk about that part first, and I'm not going to get to that later section of their report in this discussion, but again, you can check the link below to read the report for yourself. 188 pages, but it's worth reading. Early on in their report, they pretty much go after the CEO of the company. They criticize him for making a lot of appearances on television shows, quote, furiously pumping the stock. And they make a reference at the top there to an early lockup expiration that they believe is fast approaching. We're going to talk about that more in a second. They point to a couple of trading days that happened December 31st and January 4th, where the stock crashed about 50% on those days. They claim this is because the PIPE investors, when you have these SPACs, you have the regular investors and you have something called PIPE, which are additional investors, that these investors had their lockup freed up and they were dumping their shares as quickly as they could, and that tanked the stock. They suggest this is going to happen again when the lockup on other investors' shares expires and they dump their shares. My impression from reading the report is they don't know that this is what happened with the PIPE investors. They claim it's what happened, and they're claiming that the CEO is covering it up. I did not see enough information in here to be sure that the PIPE investors' lockup did expire and they did sell. But it's pretty transparent that, according to them at least, the stock crashed on those 2 days. What caused it? And the CEO, they claim, played dumb. He didn't know why it was happening. I don't know. Now, this is a piece that really rings true to me, that I see a lot of similarity between this particular company, QuantumScape, and other companies that I suspect are frauds like Lucid Motors, and a lot of people think are frauds like Nikola mentioned here. One of the key features of these frauds is the backing of a famous investor or corporate partner, in this case Volkswagen, the quote smart money that lends credibility to the scam. They compare it to the investors in Theranos, they compare it to JP Morgan vouching for Bernie Madoff, and they compare it to General Motors blessing Nikola, which they call an epic hoax. This is exactly what I've seen with Lucid Motors, which I think is potentially a fraud. Same situation, SPAC, same situation with high-profile investor. Down below my head, you can see the Saudi Arabia investment fund has a big investment in Lucid Motors. They own like 2/3 of it. And over on the right, you can see that the SPAC is led by another big-time deal maker, Michael Klein. The lockups are going to expire at some point. These guys, the argument is these guys are pumping the company, pumping the stock so that they can get out early and get out with a big profit, leaving retail investors hanging. Same story. Is it true? Does this mean Lucid is a fraud? No, but I definitely see this in the way Lucid has been pumped. Oh, they've got this big time guy. They've got Peter Rawlinson, the CEO. He used to work for Tesla. They've got all these Tesla people. All these efforts to establish credibility for something that isn't even a product yet. There's no demonstration. There's no real demonstration this thing actually works. And just like the role Michael Klein plays with Lucid in that story, you see billionaire venture capitalist Vinod Khosla, hopefully I'm pronouncing that right, and they bring in Bill Gates. You've got these high-profile investors, these high-profile celebrity-type figures, putting their imprimatur, their backing, their names, and their credibility here to support this company, to support the claim that it's viable. Scorpion Capital really goes after Khosla, as you're going to see next. I get the feeling that Scorpion Capital guys really don't like venture capitalists, so they rip into Khosla, they rip into John Doerr of Kleiner Perkins. They're pretty much, to me, they're calling these guys frauds. Is it true? I don't know. I have a friend who thinks highly of Khosla. I can't know. I'm not qualified to judge this stuff, but they are going after this Khosla connection, saying they are key drivers of its credibility and its valuation, hyping it and boasting of its impact upon their fund's returns. And they really pick apart Khosla's history of being involved with other battery startups that failed. I left most of that out in this video, but if you go through the report, you'll see they have several examples of startups that Khosla invested in that failed. The thing is, venture capitalists often invest in multiple companies, and they rarely get success. You know, if they invest in 30 companies, they're just hoping for a few of them to really be successful. So that one doesn't really ring true to me, but the fact that Khosla has had a number of failed investments in battery companies, it's not great either. A lot of the Scorpion Capital report involves going through specific points in QuantumScape's slide deck and catching little details that look off. So here, this is from slide 20 on the QuantumScape slide deck, and they have this battery cell that they used as an example, and it turns out for the entire cell, the total energy is only 200 milliamp hours. This is a very small battery. As they put it, less than 1/3 the capacity of a common hearing aid battery. So doing a demonstration on an extremely small battery is not really a great comparison to something you're going to put in a car to power a 4,000-pound vehicle with, monster cells. The Tesla battery is this 4680 cell. We're talking about something that's incredibly tiny compared to this. Not really a fair way to compare it. In this particular page, they're relying on a, quote, leading academic who said when he looked at what's shown on the page, this particular cell they were using for a demonstration would have about 200 milliamp hours. Again, very, very small cell. Another key component of their claim is faking data. And this one really rings true to me. This is slide 17 from the slide deck, the QuantumScape slide deck. And a researcher looked at this and said, wait, this isn't real. And you can see there's some gray dots. And the gray dots reflect real data. These curves that QuantumScape used, they contrasted real actual data on genuine lithium-ion batteries. And they said, our battery performs better. And they have this blue curve. And the blue curve, if you look at it closely, you can see the data is too perfect. Whenever you see these graphs, Jeff Dahn's battery research, if you watch limiting factors videos, you will see actual data points, and the data points are not perfect. They're sort of close to a curve, but they're off in some ways. And in this particular curve that they drew, the data is too perfect. The line is too perfect. That's not possible. It's not the way things work in the real world when you do this kind of testing. And that's a red flag, as they call it. The quote they got from their expert, it's not real. There's no variation in the data. I can't see any data points. It's just a randomly drawn line. It's not actual data. It's disturbing to use real data and then compare it with something that's not real. As they're describing it, and I tend to agree, this is misleading. And that's something you really don't want to have in a slide deck when you're selling something to investors. This is another example of fake data, or what they're calling fake data. And as they put it, the chart appears to be fake as it shows a cell being discharged at over 100% of its energy, which common sense says is impossible. And the solid state battery expert that Scorpion Capital is relying on, they didn't name any of these people, but that's understandable. Some people might not want to be named. At the same time, hey, if you're going to be critical, maybe you should put your name behind it. But, slide 22 of the QuantumScape slide deck, and we got a problem. It looks like they did something that was impossible. And you can fake it with tricks, but this can't happen in real world activity. You can see just to the right of me, the purple line shows a cell cycled at more than 100% of its energy. A cell can't produce more energy than it can hold. Something ain't right. This slide, which is page 28 of the Scorpion Capital report, gets into dendrites, which I mentioned earlier. Dendrites are a huge problem, and they talked to 6 former employees who were very, very critical of QuantumScape's dendrite claims. The issue is if you can solve the dendrite problem, that makes it great. You can't solve the dendrite problem, your batteries are not going to last. They're not going to perform that well, and in particular, they're not going to last. You have a car with a battery in it, you want the battery to last more than 10,000 miles. You need the dendrite problem to not happen so your vehicle can last a long time, your batteries can last a long time. So one employee said the dendrite problem was a showstopper. Another employee said, I don't believe they've solved dendrite formation in a real battery. Another employee said they were having problems at the coin cell level. It's a very difficult problem. Coin cell is a small cell. Doing it at a larger cell size is even tougher. Another employee says there are definitely some issues with what they've put out. And another employee says that the CEO's dendrites claim is a bunch of bullshit. That's definitely bullshit. This is not good. This is a really bad sign for investors in QuantumScape. This should make you take notice. A lot of people are going to hold anyway, but this is something that should, and to be clear, I'm not an investor in QuantumScape. I'm an investor in Tesla. I don't consider QuantumScape to be in a competitive Tesla. So I don't really have any investments that this conflicts with, or that I don't have any particular bias that I'm aware of. Something didn't look right, and I suspected this, and I think this Scorpion Capital report confirms some of what I thought, points out other things I hadn't thought of, and yet still there's sort of like, are we sure Scorpion Capital's right, or are they missing something? I can't say that, but this doesn't look good. Now this one's a real bombshell if it's true. They're saying it's not really a solid state battery, that some of the material, some of the indications are that they're using some kind of liquid or quasi-liquid electrolyte. A solid state battery doesn't have liquid in it, that's why it's solid state. And there's some diagram that includes a mystery component labeled catholyte. Their experts are saying it's a liquid that comprises the bulk of the cell. Well, if it's a liquid, then it's not solid state, and that's a huge problem. So this one expert says for sure they have liquid in their battery, it's not all solid state. It has to do with the pressures that are shown. They can't ensure contact between the electrolyte and the lithium metal. There's just something wrong here. This is referring to slide 10 in the QuantumScape slide deck. In this slide, a former employee allegedly says that QuantumScape is making claims that are comparable to a gasoline-powered car achieving 200 miles per gallon on a drag strip. And they refer to, like, if some outside body certified this result, as long as you have to create a scenario where there's no drag, there's no other problems, there's nothing, the temperature is perfect or the temperature is imaginary, you create certain crazy conditions and you're able to deliver that. Lucid Motors has something similar where they claimed an incredibly long range, like 517 miles, relying on some lab, but we don't know what that lab tested. They didn't produce the report from the lab, they just claimed that the lab said it, and they got a quote from the guy from the lab, but where was the documentation? They hid the documentation. This is why I think Lucid, it smacks of the fraud, the same kind of fraud that I see in Lucid. I can't say for sure that Lucid's a fraud, but it's what I see in them. I see the same thing here. So that's my brief summary of the Scorpion Capital report. Check the link below to read the entire report, 188 pages, a huge amount of detail there. I found it pretty persuasive, and yet at the same time, I'm kind of with limiting factor. Some of the things here seem like they're making more out of it than there is. Honestly, I think the slide deck on its own, what QuantumScape says they're going to deliver, was underwhelming. That was my biggest criticism. They weren't really planning to produce in any volume until something like 2028, which is kind of late. And it's not really clear that they're going to produce anything that's better than what Tesla's going to have by that point in Tesla's own cells. So a lot to be concerned about here if you're a retail investor in QuantumScape, that there may be a moment coming up where the lockup expires and inside investors from the venture capital firms or the CEO or somebody has a chance to sell their stock and take a quick profit, and that leaves your share price lowered and you're down. If you genuinely believe in this company and you think it's ultimately going to produce, then it doesn't really matter because it'll be valuable in the future. But it's valued kind of high for something that, to me, doesn't have that much promise. I haven't shorted the stock. I haven't bought any options to give me some kind of position in the stock. Just, to me, it seems iffy, and I didn't trust it. And having seen this Scorpion Capital report, I want to make sure people are aware of it. So check the link below to read more about it. To see more of my concerns about Lucid Motors, check out my other videos. If you like the way I think, please consider buying my book, Fair DUI. It'll help you if you ever get pulled over by police. You'll have a much better sense of what to do and how to handle yourself and understand what's going on. Of course, please support the channel on Patreon. Thank you very much for watching.